Hi guys. So today we will be explaining the two strings problem from the programming competition. Basically the goal of this problem was to find the longest substring of a given two strings. So first we'll set up some basic input just using scanner. Then the first thing we'll find is the number of test cases that we're going to be using. And let's call that num test. We'll need that for a for loop. We'll have a kb.next line right here. It basically will just move the scanner forward because otherwise you can run into issues with taking input later directly to a string. Just the way that scanner works, it's kind of annoying. Then we'll have a for loop that iterates through the number of test cases that we'll have. And then inside of that, we're going to have two string variables called 1 and 2. 1 will just be our first string, 2 our second. And then we're going to have another string called match, which will hold our longest match for this test case. And we'll just initiate that to be empty because we'll need to do some tests later with the length. Then we're going to have one for loop that's just going to use integer j, which is basically the index of the character that we're looking at in our first string, which is why we stop at one.length. We also have another for loop nested inside of that uses variable k to keep track of the second index. And then we'll also have an int count, which is basically our count of matched characters as we perform a while loop that will come later, and a string called pos_match, which will store our possible match that we might have found. That could be our longest match. So then we'll create a while loop that will run while one dot character at, and then we're going to start at index j plus our count. So this will start at the very first character at j, but as we go through the while loop, we'll move farther forward. And then we want to check if that's equal to the corresponding character in the second string, which this should do. Lost a parenthesis somewhere. So what this will do is check our characters, and as long as we have a matched character, we'll continue the while loop. So then what we're going to do is take our pos_match screen and append the current character. So you could grab it from either string. I prefer to just grab it from the first string. And then we'll iterate count. Oh, sorry. And then we just have another if statement inside to check that we don't count past the end of the string. So j plus count is greater than or equal to 1.length, or go over the other string. So k plus count greater than or equal to 2.length. And then if we do encounter a situation like this, we'll just break out of the while loop. So this will basically keep track of our possible match string and keep adding to it. So if we do something like this, so if we have two strings like this, it should keep track of, so J will point here, K will point here, they don't match, the while loop doesn't run at all, and it just continues up. I and R doesn't match at all. I and F don't match, C and F don't match, E and F don't match, and it'll continue that until it finds any match at all. So it actually, sorry, I take back what I said before. What it will do is it'll look at N and then try to find any N's within the second string. So it won't find one at F, R, O, but it will find one here. Then what it'll do is it'll do J plus count, which will look at I and say, is I equal to the next character that comes after N? And it'll say no. But currently we have an empty string, so it'll store that shortest sum string as just N. And it'll continue that for every character here, comparing this whole string against every possible iteration of this. And the longest one it should find is FRO and FRO in this string. So what we do then is, after the while loop, we compare, but still within the first for loop, or third. If pos match dot length is greater than match dot length sorry. After the while loop, we check this. And what this will do is say, okay, if the possible match string we just found is longer than the match string we already have stored, store it as that. Because if you remember, you want to find the first longest one. So if you do greater than or equal to, it'll actually return the last longest string. So if you have two substrings that are of equal length, both being the longest possible, it would store the last one, but we want to store the first one. That's why you just do greater than. So then you set match equal to pos match and continue the iteration. And this should run through, and then after we exit J, but before continuing on with our test cases, we will just print out that string. Nothing fancy. And then this should be the correct solution. So let's just test it with a single test case. So 1, and then double check my text here. So we've got nice afro and frozen yogurt. So nice afro and frozen yogurt. And there we go, fro, which is the correct solution. And this should be able to run for theoretically any test cases, but there was a limit, but we weren't requiring any limit checking. So there you go, that's solution to two strings.